I used to believe that love, in its truest form, was meant to be uncomplicated, especially the love a mother has for her child. Pure, unbreakable, steady. But as I stood in the softly lit hallway bathroom that night, watching Logan lean over the sink with barely enough strength to stay upright, something stirred in me that I hadn't expected. It wasn't fear. Not quite worry either. It was something heavier. The realization that, for him, I might be the only constant. The only one who would always be there when he lost his footing. Logan's frame sagged against the counter, one hand gripping the edge like the floor had shifted beneath him. The smell of bourbon lingered in the air, mixed with the faint citrus tang of his aftershave, the one I had tucked into his stocking last Christmas. He had never been careless. Never the kind of kid to get reckless. But tonight had left a different mark. "I've got it," he slurred, fumbling at the faucet with trembling fingers. I moved closer and reached around him, twisting the knob until the cold water rushed out, splashing into the sink. "Logan, let me help." He didn't argue. Not really. His hand loosened, his shoulders sagging. Vulnerability was something he'd always tried to hide, especially from me, but it was there tonight, unmistakable. I took a clean cloth from the shelf and soaked it, wringing it out before placing it gently against his forehead. His skin burned with heat, his cheeks flushed. "You didn't have to stay up," he muttered, eyes barely open. "I always wait for you," I said, brushing a damp curl from his brow. His lips twitched into a small smile, and just for a second I saw the boy he used to be. The one who clung to my hand during thunderstorms, who crawled into bed after nightmares, who whispered secrets into my shoulder when he didn't know how to say them out loud. I continued to dab at his face, wiping away the sweat along his jawline and temples. "I didn't mean to get this drunk," he mumbled. His tone wasn't full of regret, but something close. Something sadder. "I know. I just wanted to forget, for a little while." I paused, cloth in hand. "Forget what?" He didn't answer, just closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. I didn't push. Instead, I turned off the water and helped him stand straighter. "Let's get you to bed," I said, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't argue. As I wrapped an arm around his back and led him down the hallway, I felt the full weight of him leaning into me. Not just his body, but the trust he still gave me without question. And in that moment I felt the truth of it. He wasn't a boy anymore. Taller now, broader. A man. But still my son. Still mine to protect. Once in his room, he dropped onto the mattress with a long breath. I pulled the blanket over him the way I had done 1,000 times before, smoothing it along his chest. "You'll feel better after some rest," I said, brushing his damp hair from his forehead. He didn't reply. His eyes were already slipping closed. Just as I reached to turn off the light, I felt his fingers close gently around my wrist. "Stay," he whispered. I froze. It wasn't the word. It was the way he said it. Soft, unsure, like he was asking for something he didn't fully understand himself. I sat on the edge of his bed, my hands still held in his. "I'm here," I said. And I meant it. Not just in this moment, but in all of them. The loud ones. The quiet ones. The ones that ached. Because love wasn't always easy. It wasn't always wrapped in laughter and joy. Sometimes, love was staying in the room after the storm had passed. Logan's breathing slowed, his hand slipping from mine. I stayed beside him a little longer, watching the rise and fall of his chest in the dark. Just like I always had. Just like I always would. I hadn't meant to fall asleep beside Logan. But somewhere between the weight of his hand on my wrist and the soft rhythm of his breathing, the stillness pulled me under. The exhaustion was quiet and persistent, like the tide creeping across a shoreline, gentle, inevitable. When I woke, the first thing I felt was warmth. Not just from the blanket or the sun trying to sneak past the edges of the curtain. It was closer than that. More immediate. Logan's arm had draped itself across my waist during the night, his body curled around mine, heavy and steady. There was no urgency in the way he held me. No discomfort. Just a natural closeness, as if he had always done this, curled close for comfort without ever needing to ask. I didn't move. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock on his nightstand and the faint rise and fall of his breath against my back. For a moment I let myself rest in it. The stillness. The strange sense of safety. And then I heard him stir. "Morning," he mumbled sleepily, his voice husky. His arm tightened slightly, not possessive but secure. Protective. familiar in a way that didn't feel recent. Morning, I replied softly. There was a pause. A quiet breath. I liked waking up with you here, he said. Something in my chest fluttered, uneasy, unfamiliar. He wasn't a little boy anymore, clinging to me after a nightmare. This was different. Softer. More intentional. I shifted gently, sitting up, careful not to break the stillness too harshly. You were exhausted, I said, brushing a hand through his hair. You needed the rest. He looked up at me with a sleepy smile that was far too warm for that early in the morning. So did you. That caught me off guard. I hadn't realized how visible the fatigue in me had become. After a moment I stood and stretched, tugging the hem of my shirt down. Come on, let's get some coffee into both of us. We didn't talk much over breakfast. We didn't need to. There was a quiet energy between us, like something had settled into place overnight. Logan moved around the kitchen with an attentiveness I hadn't seen in him for a while. He poured the coffee before I asked. Toasted the bread just the way I liked it. Sat close but didn't crowd me. When he glanced at me, there was something behind his eyes that made me look away too quickly. Later we drove to the grocery store. It was a small ritual we had never quite let go of. Even when he was old enough to drive himself, Logan had insisted we do it together. Said it was easier this way. But I think it was about the company more than the convenience. As we walked down the aisles, he kept close. His hand brushed mine when we both reached for a box of cereal, and instead of pulling back, he just smiled. You've still got the best taste in junk food, he said. I laughed. It's not junk food if it brings joy. He looked at me, holding my gaze for a moment too long. You look really pretty today. The words landed somewhere unexpected. Not because they were inappropriate, but because of how softly he said them. How genuinely. I blinked, caught off guard. That's sweet, honey. But I didn't exactly get dressed up for produce and canned beans. You don't have to get dressed up, he said, his voice quieter now. You're just always beautiful to me. I turned away, pretending to study a row of lettuce that didn't need studying. My pulse quickened. He wasn't being sarcastic. There was no teasing behind it. And for the first time I realized he wasn't just trying to be kind. Something had changed. At the checkout line, he placed his hand lightly on the small of my back, guiding me forward as if I were fragile, like something worth protecting. His touch was careful. Not possessive. We walked to the car in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The kind of silence that feels like a held breath, like something that's waiting to be said but hasn't quite figured out how to take shape. As we drove home, Logan glanced at me more than once. I felt it even when I didn't meet his eyes. His glances weren't casual. They lingered, thoughtful and unreadable. Halfway through the drive he spoke. Mom, do you ever feel invisible? I glanced at him, startled by the question. What do you mean? He kept his eyes on the road. I don't know. I guess I think about how much you do for everyone. How you're always looking out for other people. But who looks out for you? My chest tightened. You don't have to worry about me, Logan. I know I don't have to, he said softly. But I do. I looked at him, then really looked. And something unspoken passed between us. By the time we got home, the weight of his words still clung to me. He carried the bags into the kitchen without being asked. Unpacked everything with care. And when I turned around to thank him, he was already looking at me. Let me take care of dinner tonight, he offered. You should go rest. I opened my mouth to argue, but then I saw the sincerity in his face. The way his eyes softened when he looked at me. And suddenly I didn't have the strength to refuse. Okay, I said quietly. Thank you. Logan smiled and rolled up his sleeves, turning to the stove. I stood in the doorway, watching him move through the kitchen like it was second nature. Confident. Steady. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit until now. He wasn't just my son anymore. He had become someone who noticed me. All of me. And the part of me that had gone unseen for so long, she was beginning to wake up. The evening passed the way a dream does. Slow, soft around the edges, something you want to stay inside of just a little longer. Logan and I didn't speak much after that. We didn't need to. He lay back on his bed again, one arm folded under his head, the other reaching absently for the lamp to dim the light. I stayed beside him, my legs tucked beneath me, one hand resting idly on the throw pillow between us. There was no noise except for the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan and the soft creak of the wooden floor as the house settled into the night. For a long while we just existed like that, side by side, each of us silently grateful for the quiet company. The rest of the world, with all its noise and distance, faded into the background. At one point, Logan shifted slightly, resting his head closer to where my thigh touched the blanket. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask. It wasn't that kind of moment. I ran a hand through his hair slowly, like I used to when he was younger, and couldn't fall asleep unless I soothed him with touch and patience. His eyes drifted closed, lashes dark against his cheeks, his breath gradually deepening. "I don't think I've felt this at peace in a long time," he murmured, voice heavy with sleep. "Me neither," I whispered. There was nothing inappropriate about the moment. Nothing overt. And yet something had changed. Not the way a switch flips, but like water wears down a stone. Slowly. Gradually. Inevitably. I knew deep down we had stepped into a space that wasn't quite mother and son. Not in the traditional sense. But it was a space I didn't want to step out of. When I finally stood to leave, he caught my hand, not tightly but with just enough pressure to make me pause. "You don't have to go," he said, eyes still closed. "I know," I replied softly. "But I should." He didn't argue. He didn't open his eyes. But he didn't let go either. So I sat back down, his hands still in mine, and leaned against the headboard. It was nearly midnight when I finally returned to my room. Adam, my husband, was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I changed quietly, slid under the covers, and lay there wide-eyed in the dark. I wasn't thinking about my marriage. I wasn't thinking about the life I had built or the one I had lost somewhere along the way. I was thinking about Logan. About the way he had looked at me tonight. About the way I had felt, seen, needed, wanted in a way that hadn't felt maternal. And I didn't feel ashamed. He awakened. The following morning, the sun rose with a clarity that made the world feel honest. Logan and I made breakfast together like we had done 100 times before. But this time something in the air felt different. Tarch. He bumped his shoulder into mine as I scrambled the eggs, and I didn't shy away. We laughed when he burnt the toast. I teased him about his inability to make coffee that didn't taste like melted asphalt. He told me he liked mine better anyway. There was nothing dramatic about the morning. Just ease. Familiarity. And the subtle current of something that neither of us wanted to name but both of us felt. Later we took a walk through the nature trail behind our neighborhood. It was something I hadn't done in years. Adam used to go with me when we first moved into the house, back when walks led to conversations and conversations led to kissing behind trees like we were teenagers again. But that version of us had long since dissolved into shadows. Logan and I walked in silence for a while. Leaves crunched under our shoes, and the sun filtered through the canopy above in scattered golds and greens. "I don't think I ever realized how beautiful this place was," he said, pausing to look at a crooked tree leaning over the trail like it was bowing to the earth. "You used to love it here when you were little," I said. "You'd find sticks and pretend they were swords." "I remember," he said with a soft laugh. "I think I tried to knight the neighbor's dog once." I smiled, and for a second we were back in that simpler world. Before distance, before age, before the weight of roles we weren't sure how to carry anymore. Logan turned toward me then, more serious now. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about starting over?" His question made me blink. "Starting over?" He nodded, brushing his fingers along the rough bark of a tree as we passed. "Just letting go of everything that doesn't work anymore. Choosing something different. Choosing someone different." The air shifted again. I stopped walking. "Logan." He turned to me. His face wasn't daring or desperate. It was open. Earnest. Quietly brave. "I'm not trying to make things harder for you," he said. "But I need you to know. I see you. All of you. And if I could give you the happiness you deserve." "Don't," I interrupted gently, my voice trembling. "Don't say it. Not yet." He didn't push. Just nodded once and kept walking, giving me space. But everything had changed. And we both knew it. That evening I stood in the kitchen, the window open to the sound of cicadas and distant thunder. Rain threatened in the distance but hadn't yet reached us. The air smelled electric, like something waiting to break. Logan walked in quietly, towel slung over his shoulder from a shower, hair damp, shirt clinging to his frame. He didn't speak. Neither did I. He came to stand beside me, our shoulders almost touching as we looked out at the backyard where the grill sat unused, forgotten. The same place we'd laughed together the night before. "I don't want to cross a line," he said finally. "You already have," I replied. "Pause. I know." My voice was quieter this time. "But I let you." His breath caught, just barely audible. I turned to face him and he was already watching me, not with fear or apology but with something deeper. A kind of reverence. We didn't touch. We didn't move. But the moment hung between us, trembling like the edge of a storm. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the storm finally break, the rain tapping steadily at the windows like a quiet question that refused to be ignored. In the dark, I replayed every word, every look, every moment of silence between Logan and me. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads where no path was clean, but one of them felt like truth. By morning, the rain had gone, leaving the world washed and glistening. I made coffee like I always did, moving through the kitchen on muscle memory alone, each clink of the mug like a pulse in my hand. Logan entered quietly as he often did. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. He walked to where I stood and poured himself a cup beside mine. Our fingers brushed. I didn't pull away. We took our coffee outside. The backyard was still damp, the air thick with petrichor and something unspoken. We sat side by side on the porch steps. I wrapped my sweater tighter around myself, not from the cold, but from the quiet awareness of his nearness. "You didn't sleep, did you?" Logan asked. I shook my head. "No." He nodded as though he'd expected that. "Me neither." I turned to him slowly. "I've spent so much of my life doing what I thought I was supposed to do. Being what everyone needed. A wife. A mother. A provider. But somewhere along the way I stopped asking what I wanted. Or maybe I forgot how." Logan's gaze didn't falter. "You don't have to forget anymore." His words weren't laced with expectation. They didn't press for more. They just waited. "Do you know what scares me most?" I said, my voice low. "It's not what people would think. Or even Adam. It's how right this feels. How effortless it is to be around you. How I don't feel like I'm pretending anymore." His hand brushed mine, just once, like a question, not a statement. "I don't want you to pretend either," he said. We sat there for a long time in silence, sipping our coffee as if it were any other day. But it wasn't. Not anymore. The next few days passed in a kind of suspended stillness. We didn't cross a line, but we didn't walk away from it either. There were moments when Logan would look at me and my heart would stutter. There were moments when I caught myself smiling just because he was in the room. And then came the night I knew everything would change. We had finished dinner and were cleaning the kitchen together. An easy rhythm, a quiet partnership. "Movie night?" he asked casually. I nodded. "Sure." We settled into the living room, a throw blanket between us, and started something we'd both seen before. The kind of film you didn't really need to watch because the company mattered more than the plot. Halfway through, I felt his hand find mine under the blanket. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just held on. And slowly I leaned my head against his shoulder. The quiet was full of things we didn't say, but all of them were true. By the time the credits rolled, the house was dark again, save for the glow of the TV. I turned off the screen and the sudden silence was louder than anything. Logan stood slowly and offered me his hand. I took it. Not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I did. We didn't speak as we walked up the stairs. We didn't need to. In his room he paused. "You don't have to stay." "I know." He stepped aside, waiting. I stepped forward, deciding. It wasn't about recklessness. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about choosing the one person who had chosen me back over and over, in a world that had so often looked past me. Logan stood in front of me, not touching, not assuming, just watching. Waiting. And when he finally reached out, it wasn't with urgency but reverence. His fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from my cheek. "You look tired," he said softly. "But beautiful." I closed my eyes. "Rachel," he said, and my name felt different coming from him, softer, weightier. "I'm here," I whispered. It was the same thing I'd said to him countless times since he was a child. Only now it meant something else entirely. We didn't speak of love. We didn't define anything. We just existed inside it. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the curtains, bathing the room in gold. I woke first. Logan was still asleep, his breathing steady, peaceful. I sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around myself, watching him. It would be easy to say this was a mistake. That lines were blurred and emotions were complicated. But nothing about this felt wrong. In his sleep, Logan shifted, reaching instinctively for the space beside him. I slipped back under the covers. When his arm curled around me, I let myself rest against him, feeling for the first time in years like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That evening I cooked dinner alone. Adam was still holed up in his office and I didn't bother calling him. Logan entered the kitchen just as I was plating the meal. His eyes found mine across the counter and something unspoken passed between us. Not guilt. Not fear. Just recognition. "I'll set the table," he said, and I handed him the silverware. Later as we ate, we didn't speak of the night before. But we didn't avoid it either. It hung in the space between us like a shared secret. Not a burden. A beginning. Sometimes love doesn't come the way you expect it. Sometimes it finds you in the quiet hours, in the spaces between roles and responsibilities. Sometimes it grows in the places where you felt invisible for so long you forgot you could be seen. Logan had seen me. Not as a mother. Not as a wife. Not as someone filling a role. But as a woman. And now I was finally starting to see myself again. The future was uncertain. The path ahead unclear. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore. Because for the first time in a long time I wasn't walking it alone. I was walking it with someone who truly knew me. And I was ready.